isn't it interesting that on the one hand, we live in a society that deeply believes that the fact that we have emotions is somehow wrong and that we are flawed, so that every human being is born with this handicap, kind of, that we have feelings and stuff, and we are not perfectly rational, and we are not, like, being a human is not an exact science. And at the same time, we love philosophy, we love spirituality, and every big, like, leader, every famous person who had any sort of impact is always talking about things like intuition, things like the non-linear way of life, and how Steve Jobs used to say you can always connect the dots, but only in hindsight. Like, you can understand things rationally, but not necessarily before they happen. So there is this unpredictability to being human. And even this famous quote that I think by now we slowly start accepting and agreeing on the nature of that. There is this guy who was called, I can remember his name, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, and he said that famous sentence. He was a philosopher, French philosopher, about 100 years ago or something. He said that we are not physical beings having a spiritual experience, but we are spiritual beings having a human experience, or like a physical experience here on Earth. And can we just agree on that in even if you probably do not have the same religious or spiritual convictions that I have, and probably we will not agree on how to call this higher power, whatever, but can we agree on the fact that we all kind of have questions on why things are the way they are, and that we all have an assumption that there is something more going on than what we are talking about in our day-to-day Newtonian sort of life, where when I do A, then it has a consequence B, where there's like this obvious causality, the obvious cause and effect kind of thing happening. But there's also something else going on, right? So I remember this was a very funny experience that I had while I was studying. I was doing my master's degree in mechanical engineering back in the days, and there was this sort of panel discussion where they invited a few CEOs and like big people from different industries to talk about the way how they got to where they are, like leading a large engineering company. And the interesting part of panel discussions is always the questions at the end, right? And I was always angry that this part is usually designed way too short. I remember that most of the students were asking questions like of that nature of what's the right thing to do? Like, tell me how to get there. It was all like questions like, should I do an internship before I start my PhD? Should I even do a PhD? So a lot of like tactical questions. And I remember that at the end, the last question was, if there is one piece of advice that you can give to the young students of the next generation, what would you say? And every panelist said in their own words the same thing. And it was so amusing. They all said, I was planning my life this way and it turned out completely different. I didn't even study engineering. I kind of did this and then I did that, and there was all these bumps in the road, and there was all these moments where I did not even know why I'm taking the decisions that I'm taking, but here I am and I'm happy, and this is kind of big, you know. And it was so like that piece of advice coming from the heart, coming from what they feel is important in that moment, was so opposite to the nature of the questions that students were asking, right? So here we are, human beings walking the planet, kind of walking in the dark, right? So there is obviously something going on. There is some sort of plan, some sort of underlying force connecting the dots as we walk, like as our path unfolds. And the natural question, and for me always was like, can we have more guidance, please? Like, can we have more access to what is going on there? And turns out we can, because at the times when I was studying mechanical engineering, at some point I got interested in shamanic work and in emotional work and healing work. And this was the time when I was studying at a technical university, and at the same time was like flying to England to do my first shamanic training. And it was an interesting time, to say the least. But one thing that I learned is that there is a middleman between, like, if I assume that I am a sort of spiritual being without understanding what that means and what that is, and at the same time, I'm a physical human being, and understanding that here in flesh and blood, I'm fairly limited. Like, I need sleep, I need food, I need all these kind of things. I have limited range of motion, limited capacities, and I live on a planet with limited resources as well. And at the same time, this other thing that I am seems to be all-knowing. It seems to be limitless. It seems to transcend all things like time and space and all that. So, okay. So what's the connecting piece? Like, what's the middleman? And it turns out that it is a thing that I call the emotional body. So why body? Is because I came to realize that as human beings, we not only have emotions for like some random reason. This is not a flaw. That is a design feature. And why body? Because the totality of my experiences as an emotional being, as a being that has emotions, shows me that just like the physical body, the emotional body also has its limits. It has its needs. It can be hungry and it needs to be nourished. And it can be wounded and it can heal. It has, as the physical body has its inherent self-healing powers. I mean, our bodies, this is crazy, right? We are self-healing machines. Like, if I cut myself, it just heals by itself, and cracked bones grow together and things like that. It's crazy, right? So the same thing happens on the emotional level as well. So, for example, if you walk around and you never express what you feel, you will starve. Like, emotionally, on the emotional level, your emotional body will starve. And it will lose weight, it will get thin, and it will get weak. And this is what happens with most of the people that I encounter on the street. Because the main kind of nourishment, the main food that our emotional body needs is expression. We need to share with others what are these waves that are going through us. What are we feeling? like right now, I'm sitting here in front of a camera, and the intensity is obviously always very different, but there's always something going on the emotional level. So right now I have lots of joy going through my body, because for me this is actually really fun to do. There is also a bit of anxiety going on in my system, there's a bit of nervousness because I don't want to fuck this up. I really want to be clear and want to be precise. And there's also a bit of fear because my like English is not my native tongue, and all these things are going on in me, right? And at all times, your emotional body is feeling at least something. There's always some sort of fear going on. There's always some sort of thing that is kind of sad or moving you. There's always some joy. There's always some anger. There's always something going on. So why is that? What's the design behind us having emotions? So the neurobiology actually is slowly catching up with this. It has been discovered that more than 60% of the cells, the tissues of the heart, are actually not muscular cells, what has been like assumed for like centuries, but that it's actually neurocells. So our heart is literally the second brain. And it has also been discovered that there is this, I think it's called ANF, I don't remember what it stands for. It's a hormone that is produced in the heart. And it has been discovered that this hormone has massive influence on basically every other gland in human body, and also a lot of influence on the brain. That's just one way of looking at it, but if you remember Pocahontas, for example, where her grandmother, the willow tree, was singing that song, "Listen to your heart and you will understand," or The Little Prince, right? That famous quote that only with your heart can you clearly see, or something like that. So the heart is the kind of the physical organ that is directly connected to the emotional body. And it is literally the middleman between your physical identity, like who you are, and your spiritual identity, that boundless being that you are. And it is not necessary to actually understand how that works, or what is the nature of you being a spiritual being. It is enough to just work with your heart, for lack of better words. And what that really means is, let me give you some practical examples, because what we call negative emotions are actually, like all of that, are features of our guidance system. So our heart, the main processing organ of emotions, there's also other parts of the body involved, obviously, but we are all made in a way that emotions give us energy and give us information. What does that mean? For example, anger. Why is anger a useful feature of being a human being? Anger is designed to inform you about boundaries, your personal boundaries. It is designed to tell you, in the moment where your rational thinking does not get it, because most of the time it doesn't, it's not designed for that. Like think of that. Consider a situation where you are like signing a deal, and you have discussed everything. Everything has been clear. There is no, like, on the rational level, it's perfect, all good. And you're there, you're about to sign it, and you have that gut feeling that we talk about. Like the main organ connected with the feeling of anger is actually in the lower belly. It has to do with the adrenals. And what is happening in that moment? We have to realize that our rational mind is not designed to inform us about what is important to us and what our boundaries are. It is not designed for many things that we use it for. So in that moment, if you sign the deal, you're actually kind of abusing your rational mind to be the instance that should give you the information. And what is really giving you the information, what is guiding you in that moment is your gut saying, this is a no, this will not work out. And you have not yet caught up with why, and maybe you will not ever, that doesn't matter. The important thing is just, if you want to accept that you have incarnated in flesh and blood and you are walking this earth right now as a human being, then you have to accept that you have certain functionality inside of your body, and that you also have this middleman, you have this emotional body that, for example, in a moment when you're angry tells, or, I mean, this is very low intensity anger, right? This is just a gut feeling, but it's the same thing. It is your body informing you that something is not okay here. And believe me that if you would escalate that, then it will feel like anger. Like, we're not used to call it anger when it's at low intensities, but when you would say, no, I do not want, I don't feel like it, I don't understand, and the other person would, for example, pressure you, then you would get angry. And then the intensity goes up, right? So another example would be when we talk about fear. Fear is designed to give you direction, and it shows where your potential is and what is important. And even not just for you, but also for everybody. Like the emotional language has a lot to do with relationships, and it has a lot to do with the fact that we are not isolated as human beings. So our rational mind might have certain access to, like, putting yourself in the shoes of others and trying to understand how others work. But our emotional body is actually much better at that. So how does fear work? Imagine a situation where you're at a meeting or gathering some sort of situation where there is different people, and there is somebody speaking, and they say, are there any questions? And then there is this moment where you are one of the people who could potentially ask a question, or you could potentially speak up. You could show yourself with something. And we all had that one situation where suddenly our heart just starts beating, like our heart rate goes up. And so you get this sort of nervousness in a way. This is how we interpret it usually. But what is going on in that moment is it's literally your nervous system, your emotional body, giving you the information that now is the time to speak up, because there is something important. There is something that needs to shift. And what is interesting is, have you ever noticed that when you start speaking in such a moment, how quiet the whole room gets? Like, it's different when people just speak up because they think that they have something to say, or if somebody is really called, has this like full body response to an invitation, and they go like, my heart is beating, I have to speak up now. Maybe you don't even know what question you're going to ask or what exactly you want to say, but that doesn't matter, because your your nervous system tells you that it's time and you will figure it out as you go. And these always tend to be, like, in hindsight, very important and pivotal moments where something important happens. So this is part of our guidance system as well. Another example would be sadness as a feeling. We tend to kind of treat sadness as okay when something really bad happens. Then we are kind of allowed to cry if somebody dies, but not for too long, because you don't want to be weak or whatever. So again, we ignore all these signals because we think that we're somehow flawed. But the main design feature of sadness, among other things, is actually to reflect our own values. Like, have you ever watched a movie or listened to a song or read a poem or saw some piece of art and you had to tear up because it was so touching? Like, there was some moment that really moved you, and you get kind of that lump in your throat maybe, or you just get tears, or something just really, you feel it's as if the thing that is happening is somehow penetrating you deeper than the normal rational kind of thing. Like, it's not, you listen to music and you go like, yeah, it's nice, but it's more like, wow, there is a moment of awe, there is a moment of somebody gets you. It's a moment where you're like, wow, whoever was the director of this movie, like whoever thought about designing this scene or this dialogue or this image, they get me. Like, this has something to do with me. What I've seen here works by the values that I really feel. Like, I remember, for example, when I watched and at some point I was rewatching the really old, like, cartoons and things that I used to like as a child. So at some point I was rewatching the first season of the Pokemon series, actually. And I remember I had to tear up so many times, because one of the main values that these characters embody, and also the learnings that they go through, is actually about real companionship and real friendship. And I didn't remember that. Like, I thought it was about these, like, funny creatures and about winning contests and stuff like that, which is also part of it. But I was really moved by that. And I had these moments where I literally felt that sadness, or we usually don't call it sadness, but it's the same thing. Like, when I'm sad or when I'm moved, it's the same neurobiological reaction, or the same feature of the emotional body that gets activated. And in that moment, this reflects to me what my values are and what is really important to me. And I realize, wow, this is an aspect of my life that I maybe have been neglecting, or that was always important to me, but that was not obvious to me that it is important. So here you can literally see how the rational mind is trying to catch up, and that it takes time to understand these things rationally, and how fast our nervous system is. Like, the emotional body, it is immediate. Like, when something happens, it has an immediate reaction. When something is a no for you, your gut feeling will tell you, or you will get angry, or both. When something is important to you, you will get that lump in your throat and you feel it. Yeah, or as in the example of the fear, you will have that heart pounding thing when something is important to you, even before you consciously recognize what you want to speak up for. What is really sad to me is that we ignore these signs. Like, we grow up with, like, even think of your first encounters, your first reactions to these feelings. You were probably, like most probably, brought up with sentences like, don't be angry, or don't be so sad, and when you are afraid, don't be afraid. It's like you're literally told by your primary caretakers, which are for a child like gods, that your emotions are wrong. So no wonder that we grow up and we never challenge these beliefs that are deeply ingrained from our childhood, and we start suppress and deny these signs that are actually signs of our guidance system, telling us what things that are really important to us and guiding us through life, basically. One story that I want to finish with is when I was, like, after my master's degree, I was working in a research project, and I literally remember that progression, how it took me several years alongside the shamanic training and other trainings that I've been doing and emotional therapy and things like that. I remember how the maturity of my emotional body literally became more and more obvious. Like the first sign that I remember getting was after my bachelor's degree. There was a little voice inside of me that was saying, like, this is not your thing. Like, you have to wrap this up and go do something else. And I did not even talk to anybody about that. There was this moment where I thought that, and then I put it away. Like, I totally suppressed that intuition because I just could not rationalize it. I could not, like, the idea was, I took the decision, I want to study, and my grandfather told me that I absolutely have to get the best education, and I promised to him that I do that. And you cannot work as an engineer if you only have a bachelor's degree, you need to have a master's, and blah, blah, blah. And I had all these ideas, and my rational mind was kind of controlling my life at this point, and I would not allow contradicting intuitions, right? And then when I finished my master's, there was again this voice, and it was louder than before. And when I started that research project, I like remember the day before my first work day, like on that Sunday, I had this sudden, like, metaphysical urge to sit on my bike and ride down to Italy to, like, to go to the seaside or whatever. So it was literally my emotional guidance system telling me that this is not the thing that I supposed to be doing, and my rational mind was fighting it. And I remember the final moment where it kind of tipped over was when I had preliminary sort of talk with my supervisor about that research project half a year later, and he was proposing what on paper looked perfect. It was kind of it was a dream situation for an engineer. It was like, you have a team and you have an industry partner, and it is even like a super useful project, something that is not just like meaningless, something where you can have an impact and do something good. And I remember I was sitting there, and my rational mind was like, yeah, sure, yeah, good, let's go, let's do it. And I remember there was this feeling building up, and like my whole body, like all the cells of my body were literally screaming no. And I managed to take a vacation for 3 months, and I never came back. And my life changed completely. And there's so many things that opened up. Like, I bumped into the right people. I started an environmental project after that. I worked for many years. Like I turned into an entrepreneur, and all these things that happened because I listened to that little voice. So I really hope that you have the courage to listen to the middleman and to accept that you are an emotional being with an emotional body, and that you can learn this. Like, we can relearn all these skills to understanding how emotions work and how we can work alongside of them. And for me, these so-called negative emotions are in no way negative anymore. Like, there is joy in being angry, and there is joy in and pleasure in being anxious, if you know how it works and if you are trained to function as an emotional being. It's amazing. And yeah, I really wish that more people learn to do that, and that we can, even as a society, accept ourselves as emotional beings and as spiritual beings, and listen more to our guidance system and see what amazing things can happen when we do that. So thank you for listening, and take good care.